My absolutely insane 0% chance of happening crackpot theory, Shanks had the abyss traveling mark on the arm that he lost to the Sea King. So I agree that this is a crackpot theory. However, it's a crackpot theory that could explain one of the biggest logistical mysteries in One Piece. Yes, Shanks lost an arm, but not because Eiichiro Oda wanted him to, but because his editor at the time said that the first chapter needed a much greater dramatic impact. That's the meta explanation of how this happened, but it has left us with the awkward in-world question of how someone of Shanks's caliber lost an arm to the Lord of the Coast under any circumstances whatsoever. If Shanks was a devil fruit user, at least you could say, oh, he was in the water, he was weakened, but we cannot use that. And this theory would depend on Shanks having received the Mark of the Abyss, which is actually, I think, the most plausible aspect of it. There is a 2-year gap between Roger's execution and Shanks recruiting Yasopp. During that time, we have no idea what he was doing, and that may have been the period in which he went to Marijois to meet his family for the first time. And assumedly, as a result of this meeting, he now has the sword of a Holy Knight, or at least the Figaland branch of Holy Knights, so why not get a mark as well? I'm sure that Garling would have wanted Shanks to follow in his footsteps serving as a Holy Knight, and getting marked would be a pretty decent way to earn trust, as it does seem to allow for some non-consensual summoning, and perhaps even other elements of control at the discretion of Imu or the Five Elders. And also, if his tattoo was the one we saw in chapter 1140, if this right here is the Mark of the Abyss, then it was on Summers' left arm, which happens to be the same arm that Shanks lost. And I guess now the Lord of the Coast is the one with the Abyss mark, so he can travel through pentagrams if he so desired. But the idea from here would be that Shanks eventually correctly identified Luffy as the next incarnation of the Sun God, the man to inherit the will of the Roger and all of the Rogers before Roger. And with that in mind, Shanks decided to completely sever his connection to Imu and the Figaland family, both metaphorically and extremely viscerally physically, by allowing his arm to be eaten by a Sea King, so that Shanks could be allowed to play out his role of guiding the world to its dawn without interference from those who can control his movements through the abyss. In his defense, just imagine if your boss had the power to call you into work at any time of day in any state. Mate, you're not saving the world in that condition, especially not if your default underwear is the choice of Saint Summers, because I actually have a much better option for you. What I want most in the world, and don't ask me why, but it is a pair of Sabo underwear, which do exist. There is officially licensed One Piece underwear, but it is only available all the way over there in Japan, which is where I am not. And it's practically impossible for Western swine like ourselves to get, because a lot of the merch websites are Japanese only, meaning that they're only in Japanese and they only ship within Japan even if you can read Japanese. But I've recently found a brilliant solution to this, and guess what I've got my hands on, as well as other bits. That solution is Zen Market, the sponsor of this video, but a service that I've been using for years and years now to get the most obscure and amazing One Piece merch that you never even knew existed. Zenmark is a proxy shopping service. You go to their website, select the products you want from Japanese-only providers, and Zen Market will then purchase them on your behalf, and once those items have arrived in their warehouse, you can create a parcel to send to yourself overseas. I have a lot of weird One Piece stuff, and the vast majority of it comes from Zen Market. In my latest package, I got a Eustace Captain Kidd bounty pillow, a copy of One Piece Rurubu, which is a phenomenal book that depicts all of the real-world inspirations for One Piece locations, and I even got this amazing ornamental devil fruit. And most importantly, and I'm much more excited about this than I should be, I finally got my Sabo underwear. That's right, you should be jealous. But you don't need to be, because you can have this as well, and more. You can find anything, and I mean anything, on Zen Market, not just One Piece related, but anime and even Japan in general, and it's available to use in 19 languages with access to 10,000 Japanese stores, integrated with Japanese shopping platforms, with many shipping and payment methods for you to buy almost anything. And not only that, but you can buy that almost anything shockingly cheaply, because genuinely, I am amazed at how much all of this stuff did not cost me. And if you click my link in the description and use my code GRANDLINEREVIEW, then you will be gifted 1,000 Zen points, with each Zen point being the equivalent of 1 yen. I really cannot recommend Zen Market enough to any One Piece fans, which I guess is all of you watching, at least most of you, because as a man whose life is consumed by fictional pirates, this is genuinely one of my favorite websites, and I am honored to be sponsored by them. So definitely check them out. I'm considering getting Kizaru underwear next. But for now, it's back to you, me, Thanks, me. Am I the only one that thought that Scopogaban used Future Sight before giving up, hinting that he saw the power of Luffy and Zoro and thought it was enough to pass the test? Looking back on it, I do think this is highly likely. As soon as Luffy and Zoro team up with their respective full powers, there is this close-up of Scopogaban with a funky little shine on his eye, which could absolutely be an application of Future Sight. In the manga, Future Sight is usually portrayed as quite a generic effect, with the classic anime speed lines surrounding a close-up of a character's face. But I do really like the idea that Scopogaban took a brief glimpse, even just 5 seconds into the future, and what he saw was either a satisfying display of power, or an outcome that would have led to a very bad situation for him. Or maybe Scopogaban saw even further than 5 seconds and has more of a Shanks-like mastery of observation haki. Shanks was referred to in Volume 4 Billion as the killer of observation haki, and after seeing him look at least 10 seconds into the future with Eustace Kid, that may mean that Shanks can look further than anyone else, and thus negate the benefit of observation haki for his opponents. Because no matter what, Shanks would always have the most information. He can see further than you. And that's a skill that Luffy may need to learn before the series ends. And it's not one that we've currently seen from either Rayleigh or Roger, so perhaps Shanks picked it up from Gaban, and that's the little gift that Gaban can pass on to Luffy. Or not, it could have just been basic Future Sight, even maybe basic observation. But just on haki though, we have another Armament Conquerors based discussion, because this chapter did spark the potential of Scopogaban having Conquerors haki with the black lightning and everything. Because when he imbues Loki's ki and slams it down, it does result in the black lightning effect. But the theory of one of my artists, Tenguki, is that the black lightning appears as an impact for even those who use high level armament haki, which would explain why the effect appeared during fights like Jinbei versus Husu, despite neither of them being a conqueror, and yet the black lightning, it is still very much there. And the way to tell the difference is that those imbuing items with true Conqueror's haki have this trail effect from the movement of the weapon, which we have seen in Roger, Whitebeard, Kaido, and Zoro at the very least. Although Zoro, he's an even more curious case, because for the most part, he has this very unique smoky haki effect going on around the swords. However, in his final attack against King, you can definitely see what I guess we're going to call the Conqueror's trail following the swords. Another way to describe it is that the Conqueror's imbuement looks a lot more like flames. It's a lot more flowy. Whereas the impact of armament looks a lot like electricity. It's extremely jagged. All of which is to say that in this chapter, Scopogaban's attack produces an effect more consistent with an armament clash, if this is indeed how we're supposed to identify them. Because when he raises the ki to strike Luffy, there is what appears to be a maybe trail, but it's not the sleek flame-like Conqueror's trail. Alternatively, we could just be reading a little too much into it. You cannot introduce a character who is a left-hand man of the Pirate King on par with Rayleigh and Roger and get dog-walked in the very next chapter. I agree, but I think this is one of those cases where current internet culture has evolved for the purpose of ruining everything. This isn't the vast majority of One Piece fans. No. Most of you are very chill, very cool, very physically attractive individuals, but the loudest people online are the ones that have this phenomenal talent for complaining. And in this case, if Luffy and Zoro clearly overcame Scopogaban, then there'd be a lot of whinging about Gaban not living up to the hype of being the left-hand man of Roger, whereas if Gaban did live up to that hype and he'd clown Luffy and Zoro, then the complaints would be something like Luffy and Zoro getting nerfed and not having the power that their status should command at this point. Which is why I think that this clash ended about as perfectly as it could, especially with the Future Sight idea, the only person who knows for sure what would have happened to Scopogaban. Otherwise, it's left to the imagination, and this clash gives us exactly what it's meant to, which is just a bit of fun. But instead, on the internet, it's resulted in, well, they didn't show us anything. I have no problem with the fight being cut short. Last chapter, I was thinking, we don't have time for this, Gaban. Your son is in great danger alongside the whole kingdom. You and Luffy need to be teaming up. All right, I think I see a problem here. The issue here is that this just isn't how any One Piece father would think, unless that father has a daughter. When it comes to daughters, One Piece fathers stop at nothing to protect them, which mirrors Eiichiro Oda's own experience and feelings for his daughters. But when it comes to sons, fathers take a very hands-off approach, or in the case of Garp, a very fist-on approach, because their sons need to grow strong to survive in this world. And look, to his credit, I do think that Scopogaban has a lot of faith in his son Colin. Colin is 20 years old now. He's inherited the blood, the spirit, and the pride of an Albathian giant, and he would probably want to fight on his own. With that said, I still don't think that Gaban is aware of the Holy Knight situation. And when it comes to Loki, I think he either has faith that Luffy will keep him under control, or he knows that Loki isn't actually a true threat to anyone on Elbaf, including Colin. Man on the internet, do you think there's a giant secret that will make them shrink Wink. How else will Loki fit on the sunny? Thank you kindly for the $5, Mr. Anime Underworld. Bribery via super thanks is always a great way to get my attention. But Loki joining the crew is not the craziest idea in the world to me. Right now, I am still very much more in line with him eventually joining Harudin and becoming the next series of co-captains for the new Giant Warrior Pirates. However, what's very difficult to ignore is Luffy's instinctual obsession with Loki. In his own Luffy way, I think that Luffy understands Loki a lot better than almost anyone else, if anyone else, and that to me does give Loki that spark of potential of Luffy at least asking him to join the crew. Whether or not Loki would accept is an entirely different discussion, but here is one way he could. If Loki genuinely believes in the prophecy of the sun god, and if he came to the realization that, yeah, Luffy, he's the sun god instead of me, Loki, then surely what you would do is you would put your backing behind Nika. I also think it would be pretty cool for Luffy to have both a fisherman and a giant on his crew, to be sailing around the world and uniting all of these isolated races in his own small but representative way. And that is the thing that Big Mom failed to do. Despite incorporating almost every other race into her crew, she failed to get, or in the latter days, create a giant to join her crew. So it would be quite an active progression for Luffy to succeed where Big Mom failed, although I guess he technically has already succeeded because Harudin and the new Giant Warrior Pirates are already part of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, but then again, Luffy doesn't really consider them part of his crew. Although the biggest issue with having any giant as a crew member, as identified by the commenter, is how they'd fit on the Thousand Sunny. Although instead of any kind of shrinking business, I imagine that what we would do is use the Sun One Wolf strategy, because even with his normal size, he doesn't fit on any Blackbeard pirate vessel, so he just swims alongside them, maybe even acts as a ship of his own. And Loki could do the same if it came down to that. The good news for Loki is that the Straw Hats spend almost no time at sea. It's usually 1 to 2 transition chapters, and then bam, we've slammed into the next island already. That old Holy Knight might know Gaban if he was from the same generation of Holy Knights who were present in God Valley. Maybe they fought at some point in the God Valley incident. I think that's a very good point. So Saint Summers, he doesn't appear to be as old as Garling, but that might just be good aging, because he at least looks feasibly old enough to have been present during the God Valley incident, maybe. If so, I'd look forward to finding out about it. Saw on Twitter that someone pointed out how the mark on the older Holy Knight is the same as the ship that fell from Skypiea. Right, so that ship, it was called the St. Brice, which is a very fun name for a ship in this context because the ship itself has been given the title of Saint, like our marked world nobles. However, I don't know how much I buy into this. Yes, there is a mark on it that looks kind of like the very middle part of the elbow on St. Summers. Each of them is a circle and a circle with 4 protruding spiky marky things. So maybe this indicates that the Shepherd family have a connection to the Brice Kingdom in South Blue. Perhaps they were its monarchy and they were one of the 20 founding families. But I also think it's quite early to jump to conclusions because it could just be one of those generic patterns that Oda likes to use. How did you manage to guess Loki's hair color? Of all the possible One Piece hairstyles, you somehow landed on purple. Now that's some next level clairvoyance. So what this is referring to is the newly shown cover of One Piece Volume 111, where Loki's color scheme has been officially revealed, and his hair is purple, or I guess more pinky purple. Either way, this channel since the very beginning of Loki has been a strong supporter of that shade. But when making the very first thumbnail for when Loki appeared, I got my artist to do a couple of different options. For the thumbnail, we definitely tried blonde because it was the most obvious idea. Then we did purple, red, and I think maybe even green. We tried this very cool, less vibrant forest green with a yellow cloak, and it was interesting, but not quite right. And in the end, I didn't want to go with blonde, not because I didn't think it would look good, but because I knew that's what every other channel was going to use. And as a general principle, it's hard to make thumbnails that stand out when your Loki looks exactly the same as everyone else's Loki, which was the intuition of my content artist as well, as Tenguki had been a purple Loki advocate since day one as well. To answer the question though, we got lucky. And the only reason why this is notable in any way is because I think it's the first time we've ever correctly predicted one of Oda's ridiculous color schemes. I feel like the gas mask thing is Oda's way of paying homage to Akira Toriyama. You know, that could be it. In the last video, I went through this mystery of these gas mask people who just appear everywhere in the One Piece world. And this could very well be an homage to Akira Toriyama because his author avatar was this stout little robot in a gas mask who even has his own in-world bounty of $100,000, which would have been a lot more when this happened in 1986 than it is now. But the existence of these bounties in Dragon Ball, as well as Oda's interest in westerns, may very very well have inspired the One Piece bounty system. And Oda does this from time to time. He takes characters or concepts from other manga that he likes and he gives them small One Piece cameos. Probably the most well-known one is in chapter 577, and you might not immediately be able to tell who these characters are with the manga, but in the anime it is made extremely clear that this is a Naruto reference to Kisame and Jiraiya, so that could explain this enigmatic gas mask clan, that the whole thing is one big enduring reference to Akira Toriyama. A massive author in the history of manga, but this week also came with a very exciting announcement about Oda himself, as One Piece has now sold over 530 million copies, officially surpassing Harry Potter, and making Eiichiro Oda the 7th best-selling single author in human history. At the moment, he is only 5 authors away from William Shakespeare, and by the time that One Piece is over, I think it's very possible that we'll have jumped up a space or two as well. I'm surprised you didn't mention that Kuma is still on the island, and we'll have to go through another one of these games. Yeah, just when you think things have finally settled down for Kuma and he can live out a peaceful rest of whatever his existence is, just when you think that, another culling game begins in his general vicinity. Because here's something that I haven't thought about until now, but when Shamrock says that their goal is to abduct children, that doesn't specify giant children, and Jewelry Bonnie still definitely falls into the category of a children. So she could be put in danger again, and it would be interesting but also heartbreaking to see if what's left of Kuma snaps back into action to save her once more. Part of me is hoping that the whole idea of this game is going to be a sort of Zou situation, as when we were first being introduced to the concept of Zou, Eiichiro Oda, he was being very sneaky, and he was setting up this conflict between the minx and the samurai, and it was looking like Zou was going to be a lot longer than it was due to having to fight and solve this conflict, but then Raizo is safe happened and that tension was instantly diffused. So there's potential for an outcome where this game begins, but it's instantly ended by the Straw Hats and or Loki, and Kuma's body gets to breathe a sigh of relief after just a brief scare. Because another thing to consider is that we are reaching a point where it's going to become clear what weight of an arc Elbaf is going to be. At the moment, it still could be a short Zou-style adventure. We're only about 15 chapters in, and if Shamrock is packing up and going home, then we could wrap this up as a nice little adventure before moving on. However, if more complications keep being introduced, then we're on for the long haul. Although the only reason why I'm even entertaining the idea of a short arc is because, as I've detailed in other videos, there was a point in very recent history where Oda wasn't actually going to make the Elbaf arc, and we were going to move on ahead without it and go to whatever's next to fit Oda's desired timeline of the series ending. But at the same time, it feels like there's still so much left to explore here. Like, we haven't even touched the upper realm of Elbaf, the astral world. People have barely even spoken about it. I don't even know what to expect about what's up there. And unlike Zou, there's also this feeling of very strong island history to resolve with all of this Herald business, which seems like it could be tied to the history of the Holy Knights. So this upcoming child game might just be the beginning here. Like when Rob Lucci and CP0 rocked up on Egghead Island, that felt like it was going to be a short clash and then we'd move on, until York, Kizaru, St. Saturn, and the other 5 elders appeared to say, nah, we're staying here for a bit. And if Elbaf is going to be an escalation of that and make it worth Oda's time to take us here, then I am expecting big things in the future. And I'm also expecting another delivery from Zen Market soon, which again, I highly recommend you check out through the link in the description to find the coolest and most unique One Piece merch delivered straight to your doorstep.